All right. Long time no see.
Hey, you getting all juiced up for this?
Oh yeah. Well, we have the 18-month-old and the 5-week-old at home, so it's
Yeah, I get
definitely
getting a
take
whole lot of sleep.
yeah, especially my wife especially, and so I'm trying to on days when I have admin or whatever, I try to keep up with her, and so then that drains the juice a little bit. But I got my energy drink to keep me going.
Fair enough.
All right, we'll give it just a couple minutes, and then we'll get going around 7:05.
You okay? Like you on the screen?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can move in or out or wherever you think. I'm fine.
Okay.
You look great, sir.
You're about to look better.
We just did hair and makeup for like the last 30 minutes.
I figured that was what was going on.
Problem is I don't have any hair to do, so it made it a little easier for everybody.
Well, Lindsay's on.
Uh,
64.
Probably good timing for this too.
Yeah, especially with I mean I'm sure you get the same thing. Like I've been getting questions like crazy about just what's going to happen, the match race this past year and everything. And so between this and then of course our webinar next week, it'll be it'll be a good time. Those questions will come out in probably the next couple of days. I was just having Bill take a look at them.
It's going to be educational for me too, because I'm interested to hear what other people have to say about how they're going to approach it. It's a little concerning.
Yeah. 30's a lot. 30's a lot. And then some.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're just about 5 of. So everyone, I want to welcome you back to another edition of Behind the Scenes Conversations with a Program Director with OrthoMentor. I am your effervescent host, Tabs Iyer from Johns Hopkins University, and I'm really honored and it's a privilege to be here tonight, sort of at the outset. So a little bit of a different timeline. We had to reschedule with my guest tonight because of baby issues, if you will. But now that we've got that sorted, we're back at the outset of the application cycle, if you will, for the next season, just having been on the heels of this past year. And we're really honored to have Dr. Bill McGarvey coming to us from UT-Houston. Dr. McGarvey actually trained at Jefferson University in Philadelphia, did his residency at Union, was at Baylor for fellowship, and is now has been the program director at University of Texas, Houston. Specifically, he's the former American Orthopaedic Foot and Ankle Society president. And so it's even more of an honor for me, considering that we are both in the same discipline. So really give him a warm round of applause, to him and his whole social media team that's been really trying to push, getting the UT program exposed. I couldn't be happier to have you on tonight.
Tabs, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I'm honored. I truly am. And that's a very gracious introduction. Makes me sound a lot bigger than I am. So maybe I should sit closer to But no, I'm happy to do that, and quite frankly, I'm always happy to talk about our program. You know, it's a source of great pride for me, and I feel somewhat parental about it. So I'm excited for the next however long we take to talk about this.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about, maybe first off, just how long you've been at UT-Houston, and what was sort of your journey to the program director role for the residency program specifically? And then finally, what were the major lessons you've learned along the way over the course, especially in the last few years with COVID?
Sure. So the first part of that is just my journey. I think, going back to residency, and I hear this from people, but it's not trite. Those years were some of the best years that I've had professionally. I really enjoyed my residency. It was an outstanding experience at Union. I loved all the people I worked with, my co-residents, my staff. It was just a wonderful experience. And I thought, wow, this would really be kind of a cool thing for me to do at some point, is to be involved in some level of resident education. So, as you know, I did a foot and ankle fellowship after residency. I went out into private practice for a few years, and I enjoyed it, but I just felt like there was something that I was missing. And I had the opportunity to actually start doing a little bit of volunteer education at UT. They were in a state of, I won't say disarray, but I would say maybe some confusion back around the late 1990s. I got involved in a volunteer capacity for a few years. I joined full time. I was maybe the fourth or fifth member of the department at the time because it underwent a complete overhaul. My partner, who I'm sure you know and name will recognize, Tom Clanton, at the time was the chairman. Tom's also a foot and ankle guy. He's since retired, but he took over the helm and asked me to join. And I got involved in all aspects of residency. I took level 1 trauma call. I had clinics. I took a diabetic foot clinic. I mean, just did a bunch of different things. And over time, we built the department. On about 2007, we underwent another change in leadership, and a lot of people departed, kind of typical university program upheaval. And it almost fell to me by default. There really wasn't anybody else that was left to take over and that wanted to take it over. And I really, I had enjoyed the relationship that I had established with residents. So I thought, okay, this would be kind of a fun thing to do for a couple of years. And here I am 15 years later. And I'll just editorialize and say that the average lifespan of a program director is about 4 years. So I am 4 program director lifetimes down the road on this. So I guess I'm working toward being a cat in the program director area. But I've really enjoyed it. And so, I've been program director now since 2007. At this point, I don't really have any plans to leave it. There are times when I feel like maybe it's too much. It's a lot of extra activity, but something keeps pulling me back, and I think it's camaraderie. It's just that spirit of learning that just keeps me going. With respect to the second part of your questions, lessons learned, I got to say, probably the thing that comes to mind is that it's not a cookie cutter or rubber stamp kind of a business. We teach things, and our educational techniques and educational volume is the same, and residents are expected to complete a residency and be able to basically recapitulate what we do and what we give them. But to get them from start to finish, I've learned is a very different process per resident. I've learned that over time, you really have to individualize your approach to each person, because just like their personalities, they learn at different rates. They come to orthopedic knowledge and orthopedic skills in particular at very different rates. And so, sometimes you'll get a resident that hits it, they get it right away, they hit the ground running, and you never really have to do anything. They're just born to be orthopedists. And then you have other folks that just grind, and they may not seem like great surgeons right away. They may not seem like they have the knowledge or the capability. And I've just seen it time and time again where sometimes it seems like, faculty may be getting a little tired of the way that somebody's performing or underperforming, but you just have to ride it out and, stay the course, so to speak, because more often than not, and almost every time, they will get there. It just takes a little bit of individualization, and sometimes it just takes a little added touch here, added a little extra love, sometimes some tough love, but you got to figure it out per individual. And if you do that, if you take the time to get to know what people need, you will get the majority of them, if not all of them, through, and very successfully.
I love that. I love that journey, and I love the fact that sense, this longitudinal commitment that you've had. I think that's amazing for one. So kudos to you. And I think looking at success and sort of being able to dial in as to, hey, what sort of strengths people have and capitalizing on that so they can get through it properly, especially because residency is very different for people. And for me, it was a struggle. And while I look back now and it's hindsight's 2020, it definitely was not an easy thing for me. And maybe there were certain nuances that if, I had thought about or discussed, I might have had a little bit of an easier time. In the past few years, there's obviously been this major overhaul, with the process, and COVID has, through away rotations, which we often, capitalize to better understand specifically how a given student may, fit with the program. We didn't have those. Then we went to one. Now we're back, and now step one's going to pass fail. In the last 3 years, or two cycles, I will say, and especially knowing how many applicants, applied this year for orthopedics specifically, what kinds of things, what kinds of adjustments did you all make as you were reviewing, kind of thinking back about, hey, how do we evaluate applicants, and what kinds of things you were looking for, knowing that this was now sort of a different beast, if you will, and there is a lot of sort of systematic changes that are happening at the medical school, and then obviously applicant evaluation level.
So I'm going to answer that in two levels. I think in the time, even before I was program director, in the time I've been associated with the program, the things that we've looked for in a resident applicant probably have not changed. We look for people who have the attributes of an orthopedic surgeon. And by that, I mean people who are self-starters, who demonstrate autonomy, who have a high motor. When you look around, you can kind of pick out the people. When you look around your department, when I look around my department, we're obviously very different person to person, but there are themes that you see there from person to person that tie everybody together, and a number of the things that I just mentioned. Obviously academically inclined, even if you're not in an academic practice, you've got to continually learn. I think orthopedics, it's just so fast changing. You've always got to be keeping up with the literature. I think, and this is a one-off, but being a general orthopedist in today's market is just it's an incredibly difficult thing, because the volume of information that's coming at you per specialty. So if you're a generalist and you're doing shoulder scopes and knee scopes and total joints, keeping up with the level of information is unbelievable. So to pick a resident, and being a resident applicant, being able to not just absorb, but synthesize and regurgitate and do it in a meaningful way, the information that comes at you so quickly is really an important attribute. And so I think that those are things that we look for in a resident. And I guess probably the overarching thing are character traits, things that really can't be taught. We can teach them the educational stuff. We can teach them the surgical skills stuff. What we can't teach them is how to be good people and of high moral fiber and good quality individuals. That's the thing that really starts it. And if they bring that to the table, we can provide the resources to get the other things. But we want to look for people whose families have laid the groundwork for us, and that makes it a lot easier for us. Now, if we fast forward into the last 2 to 3 years, our process was, and I say this relatively unabashedly, we would very heavily rely on our externships, our rotations for students that came both within the UT system as well as from outside. We would rely on that pretty heavily because it's basically a working interview. You come, you spend a month with us. We have a high acuity trauma program. We have a high volume sports and hand and spine and foot and ankle and total joints and peds. Everything is, we have large volumes and we have a lot of staff. So we get a lot of experience for the students. They come in and they get to do a lot, quite frankly. So seeing them in a working environment makes a big difference. So we do a little pre-screening. We'll have probably 40 to 50 people rotate with us per season. And then all of a sudden, boom, it went to none, right? We had the local students, which were about maybe 11 or 12 the year that the pandemic hit, which was actually a low number, and nobody else. And so, all of a sudden, our main tool for evaluating resident applicants is gone. We don't have the ability to look at anybody but our own students. And so with the help of a couple of our key members, guys like Steve Warner and John Munns, and I'm sure I'm going to leave people out, Jim Kellum, and these are people that I hold dear to me and I really respect. Some of them I trained, some of them I work with, some of them I've looked up to and heard their names for years. But those were people that we got together and we thought, well, what can we do? How can we at least reestablish some level of relationship with students who are not able to be here. So with the help of our social media team, who's sitting here with me, Haley and Angie, and some of the other folks, Lindsay, who is our program director, and some others, we put together an outstanding team to try and provide some level of virtual education where it wasn't just, okay, hey, we're going to be able to give you some lectures and you can see what our program's about. We actually put together an interactive program where we would have students come in and the lectures were geared towards students, and we would actually do a little Socratic episode. We would ask them questions, ask them to participate, actually get them to give us some lectures and get them involved. And so for the first year, that worked out really well. We were proactive on it. I think it worked out beautifully. And we learned that while it's not the same as being there and you do lose out on the human factor, you can definitely reach out and have relationships across boundaries with virtual contact, just like we're doing right now. And I think that was a big lesson learned as well. So that was a huge step forward. We got a lot of compliments, quite frankly, on our virtual platform when we interviewed the first year around, and even this past year. I still think in person is, times better, but at the same time, we do have some bailouts if we need to.
That's amazing, and I love hearing about the way in which you are or have been able to sort of ebb and flow with the obstacles that have obviously presented themselves. You mentioned one thing I want to go back and kind of ask about. You mentioned those character attributes. What kinds of things, and especially now, when we know there's certain grades are going to pass fail, right, across the country.
Right.
Their step scores are kind of fading away, right? Obviously, there's step 2 still. We'll get into that in a second. But what facets of the letters, what facets of the app, knowing that you didn't necessarily have rotations to rely upon, what kinds of things were sticking out to you that spoke to those characteristics you were looking for? And kind of looking back, granted over the last year, do you think that those are the right things that did they correlate in any way, shape, or form in terms of, the residents that were matched and, obviously how they're doing over the course of the last year? Or were there things that you've learned, hey, maybe we ought to be emphasizing this as opposed to what we did, come 1 year ago or 2 years ago now when we were in the thick of quarantining and everything?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a continual learning experience because we have to look at what we have now in terms of residents and performance, and then correlate that back 2 years to see exactly what was going on, and how we did basically grade ourselves on the selection process. We do a very democratic selection process. It's not one person or two people. We have a fairly large and broad interview group, and it's a vote. It's basically majority rules. So we get our rank list, we all put in a grade, we get averages, and then we go up and down the list and we see if that all jives. And so the point being, to your question, I think that, some of the things are basic, right? If we open up the opportunity for people to be involved, they have the choice to either be involved or not. And one of the things is just basically commitment. What are you doing now at home while there's a pandemic? As a student, students were not only not able to rotate in their subspecialty, generally students just had to stay home. I mean, clinical education was shut down. So, when people would repetitively demonstrate themselves on our lecture opportunities and our virtual opportunities. And we in the first part actually had not only things for students, but we also had resident and fellow education, but we opened it up and we invited people. And so we'd actually just look at the names. Who are the people that are repetitively tuning in and participating and asking questions in the chat? I mean, just that, going back to that self-starterism, that autonomy, they're looking for ways to better themselves. They're looking for ways to distinguish themselves. And as a result, they did. They did just by showing up, because that was more than some other people did. You know, other folks are just kind of like, well, I can't do anything, so I'll just sit tight, go work out, maybe just, you know, catch up on my sleep, or maybe, and it's okay. I mean, to do a research project, and a lot of people didn't know what to do, and that's okay. I'm not being critical. But the ones who, you know, who figured out, okay, I'm going to go out there and see what's available. How can I enhance my orthopedic knowledge? How can I further myself? How can I establish relationships? Many of these folks reached out. They touched base by email. They reached out by phone. What do you have? What do you have available? I wanted to do rotation there, but I was unable to. And then based on frequency, we also looked at behavior. You know, I mean, and I'm not saying we did this very analytically. This is in retrospect, looking back on it. You know, who's really tuned in? Who chimed in to some of the regional and national meetings? You know, there were a number of things that Texas Orthopedic Association did that were available to Texas students. There were a number of things that AOA and CORD, the Council of Orthopedic Residency Directors, did. And so there were open opportunities. And then you look for basically attentiveness. You look for participation. I mean, it's almost like going back to your elementary school days and looking at just who were the good students and why. And certainly, did we probably lose out or just not really get the opportunity to be able to effectively evaluate a number of people? I'm sure that's the case. I'm sure that a lot of people were really affected by this. And for that, it's really unfortunate. And I feel badly, but you have to understand, and you at an academic institution certainly do, we had to make do and do the best we could to figure out what to do in an unprecedented situation. So you go to what you know. And then, honestly, we look at, you mentioned letters, and I think that's really critical. And I think going forward for those students out there, you know, establishing relationships with people, and then, very frankly, leveraging those relationships, getting letters that say, hey, not only is this student a quality student because you all are, but this student is really outstanding. He or she distinguished him or herself by doing so much above and beyond what I would have expected, showing up on weekends, or, you know, going the extra mile, or just helping my staff who was struggling because they didn't know what to do in the pandemic times. You know, I mean, I heard had a few of those letters. You know, this student stood out because they did something that was relatively mundane from an academic perspective, but it meant the world to the staff to be able to just, that individual reached out to help and to do whatever activity it was. So I think we just looked for those. You know, we're kind of looking in the corners for things during that time, looking for atypical things that we wouldn't normally look at because we didn't have those things to look for.
And I think what you're speaking to, and I mean, and that was just really well stated. And I think what you're discussing, and I'll share with, you know, kind of at large, is the important, it's almost this sort of networking, sort of like, you know, kind of these business soft skills that we don't necessarily talk about. And many of you have heard me say this in other forums, but these are things that I became that much more amplified as being necessary. And how do you do it? How do you just send an email? Like, how do you make a cold phone call when you don't know anyone? How do you get involved with research, or how do you establish that, you know, connection with a given place at UT-Houston or otherwise? And I think that those are things that now, as things start to drift back towards more normal or pre-COVID like times, they'll still be important in a lot of ways, because those are going to be differentiating factors, right? Especially in a way that, hey, you've got, you know, there were 1,700 applicants through and through. In this particular cycle, it's either going to stay at the same level or go up, you know, to be honest. And so how do you differentiate yourself amongst all the other amazing kids that are out there? And I think what Dr. McGarvey is talking about is obviously, you know, tantamount to that. You know, one of the things that kind of we've alluded to is the notion of step one that has gone to pass fail as of this year. In your mind, and I had always said that the pandemic was sort of foreshadowing of things to come. How will you kind of differentiate between the kid who has step one with the score, step one that's pass, same institution, different institution, and they don't necessarily have, a step 2 score yet just because of timing. What are you going to maybe just saying blanket, we're not going to be looking at step 1 at all and look at everything else like you mentioned? Or is it going to be, hey, that kid had a step 1 score, he or she has a little bit of a leg up because they can demonstrate their ability to take that test, whereas the person with the pass, well, we'll see what their step 2 shows and go from there, but they may be on the waiting a little bit as that score, as you're waiting for the score to come in. What sort of sense do y'all have in that regard?
I'll be honest, we're still working through it. I think it's a challenge. And, let me be clear. I don't think that step 1, step 2, the USMLE in general is not necessarily the perfect predictor of how you're going to do as a resident or in any specialty. But it provides us an opportunity to filter through the, 1,700 applications. We didn't get 1,700 students to apply. That's an overall number, but we were over, I think, 900 last year for 6 spots. So, the issue becomes, how do you just drill that down? And to be frank, what's going to happen is, as the step 1 scores go away, students who previously would self-select out of the programs because they felt that their step 1 scores were not competitive will no longer have that restriction. So I agree with your comment that you made, that I think we're going to see an escalation in applications to programs just based on the fact that one of the filters actually goes away. So how do we drill that down and get down to a reasonable number of people to interview? I don't know. I think it's going to be a real challenge. I think it goes back to, one of the advantages of the coming year is that away rotations have been reinstalled. And so giving us the opportunity to, again, have the availability of the student and assess those personal attributes and really put their academic skills and their work ethic to the test by having them actually participate in our rotation will certainly help to hone that a little bit. I know the CORD, the Council of Orthopaedic Residency Directors, has really elevated this concept of and I can't remember what they're calling it now, but it's basically the concept of having applicants really focus on their area, try and be truthful about where they feel is realistic for them to match, and not try to apply to programs where they're just a reach or they're really not interested just to do it. I think that's got a long way to go, because it's hard to tell students, well, you get capped at 30 or 25 programs. People are, the numbers are, people are applying to an average of somewhere between 70 and 80 programs just to get the, the numbers gains, to drill it down to, 11 to 20 interviews. And that's theoretically going to get you matched somewhere, but who really knows? And I get that every year. What does it take to get me matched? And I've provided the same answer every year. I don't know. I think you have to be yourself, and you have to go and demonstrate who you are. And in some respects, that's the perfect name for it, is the match. You want to have people of like-minded and like-valued skills going to a program that demonstrates those things and those attributes, and match it perfectly if you can. So I'm dancing around your question intentionally, because I don't know that I have a right answer. I think that we will probably go to a more broad-based evaluation process in the applications, because I don't think that I'm going to be able to do it. I have traditionally done the screening, and we've used some filters. We're going to lose a major filter. And so, and that's okay, because I think in the past, it probably has allowed us to, or forced us to skip over some very qualified applicants just based on a number. I think there are plenty of people who are qualified to be orthopedic surgeons, and in the past they haven't scored that upper echelon score in their step 1 or step 2 and have been overlooked. But how to find those people and taper them down. I think there's going to be a higher reliance on things like research activity, certainly letters of recommendations, and maybe even beyond that, phone calls from peers that we have that say, you really need to take a look at this student. This is an outstanding individual and would be a great fit at your program. I think we're going to see a lot more interaction between programs to identify who we believe our stars are at UT, that, you know, if we have 17 kids this year that are applying to orthopedics, we can only take 6 of them if we take them all from UT. So that 11 of them have to go elsewhere. We need to be advocates for our students and get that information around to other programs. So I think we're going to see a lot more dialoguing between program directors and faculty to try and promote each other's students and try and get those people to rotate in and rotate out.
Yeah, it's a good point. And there's a couple of questions that have come up that I want to make sure I bring up. And one is, will UT still have virtual opportunities kind of moving forward, or because of the way rotations, y'all are kind of pushing that to the side?
I think that that one of the things we learned from the pandemic is how to be functional when we're not face-to-face and live. Face-to-face is wrong, but when we're not in person. And so we've gotten such good feedback on our virtual platform that I think we should continue to do that, because it just expands our reach. It just gives us a better footprint into areas where people may not be able to come. There's a lot of factors that have influenced, and this predates the pandemic, that have influenced our functionality, if you will, to get students in. The whole VSAS process, the way that UT ran it, and this year is going to be a little different, fortunately, because we've rattled the cage a little bit, but over time, what would happen, they would not review applications until June. And so students from other schools who were trying to set their fall schedule would be doing that in March and April, and other programs would allow them to set rotations in May. And so if they wanted to come into UT, they would either have to delay their commitment to other programs and potentially sacrifice, or they would just say, you know what, I'm just gonna have to take a bird in the hand and have to go to another place. And we would hear that coming back, you know, hey, I wanted to interview here, or I wanted to rotate here, but it was so late in the process we couldn't do it. This year's first year, we've actually been able to move that date up a little bit, and hopefully that'll work to our advantage and to the students' advantages who want to come to UT. So I think it'll be a better opportunity. But yes, we will continue to do virtual, because I think it does expand our reach, and I think it really provides an opportunity for people to see what we're about. And you know, we may even be able to provide it to third-year students in anticipation of them looking at their fourth-year rotations.
Got it. I mean, that's really cool to see. And what someone brought up, is that platform available to international medical grads, or is it to U.S. students only at this point?
It can be, and I'm actually looking at our social media folks who are nodding yes. I think we shouldn't really have any restrictions. The main issue with international is going to be just basically the time frame. It's going to be at an awkward time for them potentially. We've tried to, you know, it was even in the very first year, we tried to figure out, well, what's the right time to do it? Do we do it during the day because we think that people are home and not rotating, or are students rotating, and so we need to back it up to afternoon or evenings? And so I'm sure we'll still work on that sweet spot of timing, and the internationals will add a degree of complexity to that, but they're welcome. And I think our platform is internationally available, so it's going to be something that if somebody wants to come from the UK or from Europe or any country, then they're welcome to do it.
That's awesome. When you mentioned about, and this is something I encourage too, you know, reaching out to programs, do you tend to encourage reaching out to you as the PD specifically, or is it better to reach out to the program coordinator who can then help you sort of navigate the best person to talk to? Is there an advantage to either or, and is it program dependent at the same time?
Yeah, I'll start backwards. So I'm sure it's program dependent, and every different program in the country is going to have a different answer for this question. I have my email is available, and obviously because people reach out to me, and I have no problem with that. The difficulty is that depending on the numbers of people reaching out, it's hard to get back to everybody and have a meaningful response, as opposed to just yes, no, okay. Right. I don't mean for that to be terse to students who have reached out to me, but I get on average about 125, 150 emails a day, and with this new process, if I say, hey, I don't have a problem with you reaching out to me, that number's going to go up. It's just hard to get through all that in a timely fashion. So we have a very skilled and efficient program coordinator team with Lindsay, and we're actually evolving that. We had a 3-person team. We're going to be down to a 2-person team upcoming this year. We may build it back to 3, but I think either is fine because it all filters back the same way. We have a good relationship, and so even things that I don't see directly, I will see within the next couple of days. Hey, I got these emails from these students, and we'll go over those on a weekly basis. Boom, boom, boom. These are people that reached out to me. What do you want me to do? How do you want me to respond? Do you want to respond? And so, we take a team approach to that, and then I like to respond to everybody. I don't like to leave people hanging. I remember what it was like to be a student looking into orthopedics without having anything that really stood out. I thought I was a good student. I thought I had good work ethic, but it was kind of like, what's unique about me? And it was hard to figure that out. And having somebody respond to me just made me feel respected and made me feel like I was at least considered. And so I like to be considerate of that. People are putting their time out there, and that's valuable to me. It means something.
That's great to hear, and I feel the same way, and kind of have the same sentiment of. And I remember and this is half the reason I do what I do is because I do remember the challenges, and having not matched the first time myself, it is definitely something that you take all this time and effort, and you're reaching out, and hopefully you get at least a response, maybe yes, maybe a no, but hopefully people can take the time to at least have that meaningful conversation you're referring to. So I think that's absolutely amazing and super admirable. So, and I know all the students here and I myself appreciate that too. I think one more question I want to get into the UT kind of side of things specifically is, someone asked about, do the majority of the residents come from Texas, or are y'all kind of open to having others? Sounds like you alluded to the fact that UT has been a little bit restrictive because of the dates. Has that just historically been the case in terms of who you interview as well and who you end up matching as a result? Or is it because, the sort of old cliche thought of, the Texas programs, people take people from Texas is still true to an extent?
Well, everything's bigger in Texas, right? So including our egos. But the truth of the matter is that when I started with the program, it was a 3-person program, and it was I would say moderately regarded. There was really a lot of instability at the top and turnover in faculty, and it took a while to get some stability there. And then through probably, I guess, the second decade of my participation, it's taken a while to grow the program to the size that it is now. I mean, when our current chairman, Walt Lowe, came in and started, there were 9 faculty members, and his vision was to grow our program. I don't know if he even had the vision to grow it to as big. We're 10 times what we were. We have 90 surgeons now. We're adding on a few more. They're not all teaching faculty, obviously, but I mean the growth of the program has been exponential. So, if you look at our composition of residents, we definitely have a predilection for Texans or people who have trained in Texas, not necessarily, and a lot of those people are from Texas. I think some of that's familiarity. I think some of it is sort of a reputation which we're evolving, which is that, oh, well, this program only takes its own. I think for a period of time, we certainly felt like, hey, if we have a quality product here, why would we want to sell it if we can keep it for ourselves? But I also think that we turn out a good student, a great student, and I think that we want to have people from our program go to other programs. We are absolutely open and eager to have people from all over the country. And we do, at least at this point, we've evolved to the point where we have rotators that come in from West Coast, East Coast, Central, everywhere. And sure, we do get quite a few from the local area because they know the reputation. And I'll just give you, I mean, you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to throw some bullet points. UT-Houston is, if not the, and I think it is the, but if not the largest volume trauma center in the country, it's in the top 3. But I think statistically, we're at number 1. Based on volume alone, that means that our residents get to work early, get to operate early. They get to see a lot of things that, you know, are just really unique. And so being here provides you with the experience to that, and it provides an opportunity to just be enticed by that thing alone. And then, you know, we're like a lot of programs, we have professional sports teams that we're affiliated with. We have, you know, high caliber subspecialties that we're associated with. And so there's a lot of good things. But no, we are not at this point locked into, hey, let's take some Texans. We would like to have people, we would like to have geographic diversity. We would like to have more diversity in every aspect. But those things take time to grow. And, you know, I know based on some just informal platforms that have been out there through medical student circles, you know, there's a lot of word on the street. Hey, this program only takes its own. Not true. But if those students tend to be the ones that seem to shine, then we're going to rank them the highest. That's not always true. But a lot of times other program students will, again, go back to their others. But, you know, if I go back through our rank lists over the last 5 to 10 years, we definitely rank people coming in from all parts of the country. And eventually we'll get there. We'll get that geographic diversity. But I think part of that is building the program's national reputation. And that's still on the upswing, but I think we're a lot closer than we were certainly 5 and 10 years ago.
That's amazing to hear, and I love, you know, it is about. I think, you know, you always have the best chance of your home program, right? It's almost probably always the case, and you know the program, they know you, and it's a little bit of the odds, but for the fact of those attributes we're talking about, hey, like, you know, the sense of grit, resiliency, conscientiousness, all of that, you get to know those students who have been a part of the department from, you know, day 1 or even day like 180 a couple of years later, or, you know, a few years later, if you will, or whatever point in time. And the reality is that, you know, it's the match, it works, you know, interestingly. At Hopkins last year, they matched no home students, and now they matched, you know, 1. At Miami, they matched, you know, during COVID, they matched like out of the 7 spots, 4 of them were Miami kids. And this was sort of like all over the place. And so it just goes to show you that there's never, sometimes it's just also the algorithm, right? That we don't have any control over. You know, that's just the NRMP at the end of the day. But yeah, it's great to hear the way in which you're looking at it. And I truly appreciate that as well. You know, I want to really make sure we pivot and talk about the UT-Houston experience. And you started talking about that already, so it was a great segue. What are the, you know, obviously the trauma piece, I'm assuming is going to be part of this, but I'll ask you to kind of delineate it clearly. What would you consider sort of the 3 highlights or strengths of the program? You know, looking back at, you know, 15 plus years as PD at this point, you know, what kinds of things stand out to you as being the kind of key factors that would attract anybody down to Houston?
Well, I'll try and give you that answer based on information that has been fed to me over time, not only by students that have become residents for us, but students who have interviewed with us who have become residents elsewhere, but who have provided similar feedback, because the feedback is fairly constant. People come because, and they want to at least look at the program, if not train at the program, because of the high volume. They know that there's volume and acuity and, you know, just a large variety of cases. And it's not just trauma anymore. It used to be all about trauma, but now despite the fact that we have an extraordinarily busy trauma service, we have, with again the guidance of Walt Lowe with his vision, have really built every subspecialty. So we have, every one of our subspecialty has at least 2, if not 3, fellowship trained orthopedic subspecialists, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. And that includes orthopedic oncology. So we have everything covered, and that took a lot of time to get there. So I think the orthopedic or the surgical volumes and the early opportunity to operate because of those high surgical volumes really is an attraction. As a result, I think our residents are very skilled technicians, and while that's not the only thing about being a good orthopedic surgeon, it's certainly very appealing, and it's a highlight that we use to advertise. You get to come in, you get to work, you get to do a lot of things. And so I think that that's, one of the things that really gives you a large exposure to a variety of orthopedic things. I think and I'm looking for 3, there's a lot. I would say that the thing that comes up every year, not only from our residents, but again, the students, is the passion of our teachers. We have 27 teaching faculty, and to a person, every one of them is not only there, but they're there with, they bring just this incredible energy, this incredible commitment. And it's like something, it's like nothing I've seen elsewhere. And this is no disrespect intended to any other program. I got the opportunity to rotate at Hopkins. I really loved my time there. Got to spend some time with some really cool people. Paul Sponseller is a guy that I continue to think of as a mentor all these years down the road. But, I think that over time, the group of people that we have dedicates so much of their time, so much of their energy, and they are tireless in that. And I guess the third one is just the relationships, the camaraderie that I see from having selected these residents, put them together, and then in some ways allowing them to be who they are in their space and being mentors and mentees to one another and establishing the relationships with each other, with us as faculty. It's a very, I don't want to get too corny about it, but it's a very familial group, and everybody has each other's back. So I guess the support system and the camaraderie that goes along with being a resident in our program. So surgical volumes and variety, passion in teaching, and then relationships with each other and with faculty are probably the 3 highlights, the things that I am really proud of about being associated with this program.
That all sounds amazing. It sounds like I need to come do a rotation there at this point.
You're welcome to, man. Come down. We got a lot of foot stuff too. We'd love to see you.
I could do it. With obviously, as you've talked about, the program has undergone a lot of different changes in leadership, and you've been intimately at the helm of this, and that's amazing to see and amazing to hear about. Tell me about some of those things that y'all are working to improve upon as the program, as things change on the application climate side, and as the program continues to expand. Obviously, it's gone from 9 to 90 faculty. I mean, that's incredible. So what kinds of things are changing from a program perspective, or whether it's on the system level or whether it's at the kind of resident education level as well?
Yeah, I think a number of things, and it's always evolutionary in terms of our practice management. I mean, that's something that, it's a different hat that I wear as vice chair of the department, but there's a whole series of things that happen, and sometimes unbeknownst to us, about practice affiliations, practice management, those sorts of things. But I mean, I think most of the people that are on here want to hear about the educational pieces. So, I think that establishing a curriculum has been great. Jim Kellum has been instrumental in that. And he's come over from Ortho Carolinas in a semi-retired position. And the guy works as much as anybody else I know. He's not operating much anymore, or if at all. But Jim works a full day, a full week, a full year, and he's here providing tremendous insight into new and innovative educational experiences. But I would say where we need to be from an educational standpoint going forward is we need to start looking at the world of augmented and virtual reality. I think that's the next step. You know, as you know, the board has taken on its position about trying to get a lot of these residents trained early on in basic skills, right? There are these basic skills have to meet, provide these, but you know, those have been highly variable from program to program. But I think what we're going to see, and we're, you know, the analogy is always taking a page from the, you know, the airline industry, where pilots don't fly a plane until they've been able to virtually take off, fly, and land the plane in simulated conditions. And I think simulation with surgical skills is an area that is ready to explode. So augmented and virtual reality education is a piece that I'm interested in and work at and at different levels, including through the AAOS. I think, in addition, our program has always been thought to be highly clinical, and I think, you know, I've highlighted that. But if a program's going to be competitive with the Hopkins of the world and the Mayos of the world and all these, and the HSSs of the world, we need to step up our research base. And over the last few years, there's been a redoubling of efforts and resources into research. And we are starting to see the fruits of our labors with our residents, fellows, and staff being more participative in regional and certainly national meetings, podium presentations, posters, etc. So that's number two. And then number three is really just, you know, probably one of the hot buttons that you read about virtually everywhere now is looking at just being more diverse and inclusive. You know, I think going back to when I first joined the program, we had a very vanilla looking residency program. And I think as we have expanded, you know, I'm proud to say, at least right now, we are exceeding national gender diversity numbers pretty substantially with our residents. We have a large number, but a large number of females that have over the last few years come into the program. I say a large number, I mean, certainly we need more, but you know, that's an orthopedic issue worldwide, is to just increase the appeal of our program at UT to a more diverse student applicant pool. And that's a thing that we're definitely interested in, but again, it takes a lot of time to not only be able to deliver that message, but to, in some ways, break down some of the old stereotypes. I mean, I think that we, you know, I mean, when you think of Texas, things come to mind, right? And it's not just UT, right? It's just like, okay, Texas, cowboy hats and boots, and, you know, bull riding and bronc busting and those sorts of things, right? Those are just, it's like, okay, you're in Texas, you're a cowboy. Oil, whatever. You don't necessarily think that we actually sit in the world's largest medical center, which we do. And so it's just a matter of repetitively and gradually and systematically, methodically getting the word out that we are interested in being a more diverse and inclusive program. And we'll get there. And I have no doubt about that. We need to do that at a faculty level. We need to do that at a resident level and fellow level. And we are making some inroads, but it takes time. And we're committed to that.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. Well, all of this is amazing, and I love it. And you know, and as someone who, you know, I was the, you know, back when I would train at Hershey, I was definitely of, you know, of the minority relative to the demographic around me. And so to now, you know, to see these efforts, and not just efforts, but things being enacted and changes, and, you know, getting to work side by side with, you know, some of the folks who are in the leaders of these, you know, multitude of, you know, of initiatives across the country. It's really cool to see what's been happening. But I agree, it does take time. It does take, you know, a lot of work to actually engage, encourage, and really, you know, kind of, you know, put that, you know, put your money where your mouth is effectively, for lack of a better term. And there was an article I read in Harvard Business Review not that long ago, kind of talking about some of these bigger companies that say, hey, we're diverse, we're this, we're that, and how it actually was, looked upon by employees who were URM or female as more like, this is actually worse than just actually doing it, right? And really, you can't just talk the talk. You got to walk the walk. And I think that, and I love the notion that, hey, it's something it's important to us. We're prioritizing this, but it's definitely something that we're still working on, because I think it's something that we're all working on. At every single level, we can all be better about it. And I think about this, especially with my 18-month-old daughter. How do I make sure the world is a little bit of a better place for her, for when she decides to do whatever and hopefully become an orthopedic surgeon one day? But I completely
a foot and ankle orthopedic surgeon.
Yes, a foot and ankle orthopedist. I don't want to be too biased. Tell me, so amazing sentiments. I love it. Tell me a little bit about as we're kind of heading towards the top of the hour, tell me about what the chemistry is like. You mentioned this, but what's the chemistry like between the residents themselves, the residents and the faculty, and then the faculty themselves as well?
Yeah, so three groups, and the answer is relatively the same at the different levels. But as I said, the residents, it really is. I think if you have an idea about how you want to build it and how you want to plug the types of people in, it really takes care of itself, because these folks identify each other, they recognize the work that everyone's doing, and they actually come and look out for one another. And I think that we have a tremendous support system within our residency itself. I think the residents, they go out of their way to back each other up, to make sure that each other are covered, to make sure that, that if somebody's struggling, that they reach out and provide extra support, whether it be academic, whether it's a kick in the tail to actually move them along. From a social aspect, they hang out with one another. I mean, we have 29 going on 30 residents. So we just this year will fill our last year of complement increase. And are all 30 going to go out and hang out with one another? No. I mean, there's obviously going to be, groups and preferences and things like that. The singles will kind of hang out, and the marrieds will kind of hang out. But as far as, crossover in relationships, I just, year over year, it just seems like everybody gets along and enjoys each other's company, but most importantly, respects each other and has each other's backs. I can't emphasize that enough, because you don't necessarily have to like everybody that you work with. You don't necessarily have to go out and hang out with everybody that you work with, but you do need to respect them, and you do need to support them, and you need to have like-minded goals to get each other to the end point. And by the time our graduation ceremony comes around, you can really see that camaraderie and that support for each other. Those chief resident classes are incredibly close by the time everybody finishes, and they are the next yardstick for the groups that come up behind them, and they're referenced for the next few years by those groups. And I'm sure that's true of many programs, but I'm just always impressed to see that year over year. With respect to the faculty, I'll skip that and then we'll go back. With respect to the faculty, the thing that impresses me the most is that we have 90 faculty, and really there's so little dissension. And I think the same thing is true. We have a leader who has established some goals. He has an incredible talent for identifying talent and putting people in positions for success. And what he does is he also kind of dissuades people from being in positions of potential failure without having them know it. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But generally speaking, I think our faculty they share common goals. As a result, we all get along. We, again, support each other. The group that I have right here in the Katy area, which is a suburb of West Houston, we have 11 of us out in this location, and then I work out in the medical center as well. And I mean, I can pick up the phone at any point in time and call any of these folks And it's just, I mean, some of them I know really well, some of them I don't, but it's just so easy. I'm reinforced about the quality of the people that we have working with us. And then the resident faculty interaction is interesting. When I was a resident at Union, even as a PG too, I mean, we were on a first name basis with all of our staff, and it was a young group. And I'm not sure that was the best thing. I respected all those guys. I love all those guys. I still remember them all and keep in touch with some of them to this day. But I mean, it is a really tight working relationship. I see residents. There are two things. I see residents who have graduated the program, are gone years, and still reach out and keep in touch with faculty that they've felt close to. We have a resident faculty mentor program, and that's utilized incredibly heavily. Chip Rout is probably the lead guy on that. Everybody wants to be in Chip's mentor group because Chip is so active in that. But all of our mentors are outstanding, and they really go the extra yard. But we try and do things outside. We just this past weekend finished a resident faculty softball game, which we do every year. They beat us every year. I'm sorry to say in public, but we're a bunch of old guys. So what we do is we actually recruit those guys to come back and work for us, so that we can then put them on our faculty team the next year. And so
right,
cut down on the hamstring injuries and elevate our status in the game. So we'll see how that works out. But I think the thing that probably one of the things I'm most proud of is the number of people that we have actually graduated from our program, whether they be residents or fellows, who we've actually had come back and work as faculty and who have been truly stars. And of those 90 surgeons, I just did this math last week, we have 27 people that have trained here in one capacity or another who are still here. And that's over the course of 26 years. Wow. So it's not just, all these recent people. These are people that have been around. Kevin Coop is a guy who started with me. We actually finished the same year. Kevin's still around, and he's a protege and works here in the Woodlands on the north side. And so all the way down to a couple of our graduates that are coming back, or a few of our graduates that are coming back next year after fellowship training. So it's an across-the-board thing. And again, it's sort of that home interview, but I mean, it's a quality thing, but it's also very heartwarming to think that people feel so strongly about the program that this is their ideal place that they want to come and practice.
Yeah. That is amazing. And I love that. And I love that we're sort of finishing up on that sort of really high note about how engaged, how much loyalty people have to this program, to one another. And I couldn't be more impressed by the UT-Houston program. And so, on behalf of all of us, all the students and everyone listening, Dr. McGarvey, thank you so very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to hang out with us and share a little bit of insight from the PD perspective on applications. And then, of course, on the about UT-Houston in particular. Any parting words of wisdom as we wrap up here?
I don't know. I mean, you had me talk so much, I'm kind of running out of words here. But I want to say thank you. I mean, I am truly appreciative for the opportunity, and I wish the best of luck to all the students that are out there listening. I know it's a very nebulous time for you, but I guess the parting words would be: stick to it. Your commitment and your work ethic, and just be who you are. If I can tell you nothing else, go to your rotations, go to work every day, be who you are, and that will get you where you need to be, because that's the most important thing. If you're perceived as fake or hiding something, that's going to come out no matter what it is. Just go there, be who you are, and just do your best every day. I mean, these are trite things, but they level out. And we're happy to see you in Houston if you'd like to come down for a rotation.
Well, that's amazing to hear. And folks, don't hesitate to reach out to myself if you have additional questions with Dr. McGarvey. Certainly take advantage of reaching out to his team as well to get a little bit more insight into the program. We look forward to seeing you at the meeting in the not so distant future, my friend. Thank you so much for your time once again. This will be posted to the IG page momentarily, and please send me your questions if you have anything additional, especially for Dr. McGarvey as well. Dr. McGarvey, thank you again, and have a great night.
That's best to you. Thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you, sir.